I'm Roberta Glass, and you're listening to my True Crime Report. In 2001, Jaimie Snow was convicted of shooting and killing 18-year-old gas station attendant William Billy Little in an armed robbery. Snow's conviction came a decade after the crime was committed on Easter Sunday in 1991 in Bloomington, Illinois. Today, I'm going to talk to a frequent guest, Alexa, who was once in the Innocence movement. She lives locally in Bloomington, Illinois, and is also familiar with this case and the Snow family. Welcome, Alexa.
Hi, Roberta. Thanks for having me on to talk about this case.
Thank you. So last time we spoke, we were talking about Adnan Syed. Can you talk a little bit about yourself and your experience in the true crime world, especially your experience in with the Innocence projects?
Yeah, I got into Serial a few years back and the Adnan case through that, and just thinking that, Adnan was innocent. And the Undisclosed podcast after that, they really talk about how it's not even just Adnan that this happens to. This happens to people all the time. They're constantly being, railroaded by police. These innocent people, like cops, are just trying to close cases. Any innocent person at any time is vulnerable to this happening to them. And they just constantly make you feel like this is a huge rampant problem, in the justice system.
Mm-hmm.
And I got super into trying to get him out of prison. I was donating to his legal fund, to other innocence projects. I was constantly online advocating for him and debating anyone who would say that he was guilty. And this went on for a couple of years before I realized that he was actually guilty. And it really changed everything. I heard this podcast, Cold Case Murder Mysteries, and the host, Ryan Krause, he did this whole 2-part, 2-hour thing about the case. And when I first started listening, I had just assumed that he was going to say, Adnan is innocent, like all the other podcasts are saying. But he didn't. He started out by saying, I'm not going to look into all the minutia, the tiny little details that are constantly being talked about, or the phone records, or, Jay's stories, or any of this. I'm just going to talk about, Adnan and his behavior and his stuff. And I was really mad at first, and I didn't even want to listen. But after I did, I was just blown away. And I realized, oh my God, Adnan is guilty. And the people advocating for him, the ones in the know, like the people close to him, like Rabia and stuff like that, I'm sure they know he's guilty. And they just lie constantly about the facts of the case, or just fully misrepresent things. They make you believe that, little tiny details are just super important, and while completely brushing off the stuff that actually is important, like Adnan claiming to not know where he was that day, or lying about his car, not having his car when he did. And, once I realized that Adnan was guilty, I didn't have a clue really about how deep it really goes with these exoneration innocence projects. And it was the past year or so, I've really looked into it a lot, and I realized that most of the people that they get out are actually guilty.
Yeah, and so it brings us to this case, the Jaimie Snow case, where the Exoneration Project, which many people don't know exists, but it's a multi-million-dollar, what is it, a 401c? Is that
501c3.
501c3? Tax exempt organization with a budget in the millions. That comes out of the University of Chicago's law school. And they are supporting Jaimie Snow and this Free Jaimie Snow movement. Bob Ruff has doing a podcast on it.
Oh my gosh.
Uh, what is it? The True Crime
Truth and
Daily.
Justice.
Oh, Truth and Justice.
Oh,
True Crime Daily has done some few YouTube episodes on it. So, and it's a good example of some of the things that you are talking about. Now, I reached out to Tara Thompson of the Exoneration Project. I told her I had read some of the court documents and I had some questions, and would would she answer them for me? I let her know that I was doing this podcast, and she never got back to me. So
yeah, she didn't get back to you because you said you were looking at the court documents, and they don't want anything to do with that. They don't want to answer any questions about that.
well, she did not want to answer any questions, clearly. So unfortunately, her side won't be represented tonight. But first thing they do when you hear about this case, and is that Jaimie Snow was a family man. He was a family man when this robbery of a gas station was going on. He was clear across town Easter Sunday celebrating with his family. Is that true?
No, that's not true. I mean, as far as him being a family man, it's ridiculous. You know, I live in Bloomington. I grew up in Bloomington where this happened, and a good friend of mine from high school dated his son, Jaimie Snow Jr., for many years in high school. Like, all throughout high school, she dated him. Another close friend of mine actually has a baby with his nephew. And so I've constantly heard stories through the years about him. And he was a horrible person. He was a crackhead who was constantly, in and out of jail for robberies, assaulting people. I specifically remember one time his son telling me about a Christmas one year when they woke up on Christmas Eve and all their presents were gone from under the tree because he had taken them and sold them for money for crack. He was not a family man at all. Like, he was a terrible person. Family that'll be like, well, I don't know if he actually did this crime or not. They'll still say, like, but I'm glad that he's in jail. Like, he should probably stay in jail because, he's definitely a terrible person. I mean, not all of his family. I'm sure there's some of them that want him out, but I definitely know some that
would admit he's a terrible, terrible guy.
Yes. And his kids, like his two sons that I know of, I think he has maybe 3 sons and 2 daughters, something like that. They're constantly in and out of prison, too. I just saw one on Crime Stoppers the other day because he was running from police after committing a robbery, and another one just got arrested again for a burglary.
So it's not just Jaimie Snow. It's a family affair, but would criminal wise. So why was Jaimie Snow a suspect?
Okay, a few weeks before the Clark Station murder robbery, there was another armed robbery 1 minute away at a Freedom gas station, just, down the street. And Jaimie Snow was implicated in that. And Bloomington, especially in the 90s and even today, it's a pretty small town and, like, pretty low crime. Like, armed robberies aren't happening, really. But there was these 2 robberies that were very similar, except for, in the Clark Station robbery, the kid got shot. But Jaimie Snow was implicated in the Freedom one when his girlfriend at the time admitted to police that Jaimie Snow, her, and another man did this robbery, and she agreed to testify against him. And when she did this, Jaimie Snow found out about it, and he conspired to hide her out of state, and so that she couldn't testify or talk to the police. And he later ended up pleading guilty to obstruction of justice for this in order for them to drop the armed robbery charges, and he went to prison for it. And
hiding is a bit of a pattern with Jaimie Snow. Can you talk about his hiding?
Yeah, so when he did this other robbery, he got it pretty quickly. I think it was like in April. So just like a month later is when they found out, okay, it was him. And so they go to arrest him, and he fled to St. Louis where his sister lives. And they, get a tip that he's at this house, and they go there, and his wife and sister are there, and they're like, oh no, Jaimie Snow's not here. He's not here. And they're like, well, we're coming in to look. And they find him hiding in the attic.
Well, he wasn't hiding, right? We all know that he was just working on a jungle gym for his family, right? He was building that.
A surprise jungle gym.
That's right. That's right. He's a family man.
So that's why they didn't know he was there, because they weren't lying. He wasn't hiding, and they weren't lying. They just didn't know.
They didn't know. It was a big surprise. Yes, that clearly. Okay.
So they arrest him for this when he's hiding, and then he's in the car being, taken back to Bloomington, and he's all nervous in the car. They said he was shaking, and he kept asking them if he was a suspect in the murder of the Clark Station kid. Mm-hmm. And they told him when they got back to the station, they're questioning him about that crime and some other ones. And he tells them, okay, yeah, I do know who did it. I have information, and I'll tell you if you give me a deal. And they didn't. But they told him, we're going to have you do a lineup. And when they told him that, he got super nervous again. He tried to refuse. He wouldn't even stand up. They were trying to get him to stand up. He wouldn't. And not until they threatened him with more charges in jail did he agree to it. And they didn't have enough evidence at that time, because there was 2 eyewitnesses in the case that claimed to have seen the person exiting the Clark Station. And one of them was a 14-year-old boy who lived across the street. And he did pick out Jaimie Snow from the lineup. He said he thought it was him. But this other guy, Martinez, he did not. He picked out 2 other people and was like, oh, I think maybe one of those 2 is him. So at that time, they didn't have enough evidence to charge him. But he was already being charged with the other robbery and already going to be in jail for a while. So they figured, we can take some time, gather more evidence, and maybe, charge him at a later date. And they did. It wasn't until 1999. But when they did, he was living in Florida. They indicted him, and he found out. And as soon as he found out he was indicted, he fled to Ohio and assumed a new identity.
Oh, he assumed an entirely new identity with a new name?
With a new name. And I don't know how. I mean, it must have been his mouth, because that's what always seems to get him in trouble. He must have been telling people, because they receive a tip that, he's done this, and they show up in Ohio looking for him, and they find him. And are like, are you Jaimie Snow? And he says, no, I'm David Arison. And he even gives them a birth certificate and social security card with this name on it.
Oh, wow.
And they were all suspicious. I'm like, no, I think you're Jaimie Snow. And I guess he has a tattoo on his calf. And they're like, lower your sock. Let's see if you have this tattoo. And as soon as they said that, he just took off running. And they found him, I think later the same night, hiding underneath a house.
Wow. But it's not just his fleeing and his hiding and assuming a new identities. It's also, as you just previously said, his mouth. He seems to tell everyone that he's committed this crime. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't think that he would have been convicted or even, charged if it wasn't for the fact that he just couldn't stop telling everybody that it was him. There was I think it was either 14 or 16 people total testified at his trial of just different statements that he made to them, some right after the robbery, some, a few years later, that he indeed was the one who did it. And all their stories are pretty similar and, kind of corroborate each other. Like he talks about to several people, like, did you see me in the newspaper? Like, I think it was just a day or two after the crime, a couple people testified that they saw him, and he's like, did you read about me in the paper? And they're like, what are you talking about? And he's like, boom, boom, gun goes off, kid dies.
Oh, my.
And, yeah. He, one of his friends said that he come over to the house a couple days after this, and everyone was there and, seemed pretty depressed, and, kind of jokingly, he's like, who died? And someone goes, Jaimie shot that kid at the gas station. And Jaimie was just sitting there, and he had his head down looking depressed. And he didn't say anything. Like, he didn't refute what this person said or, deny it in any way. Some people, at another party, apparently he poured a beer out on the ground and said, "This is for Billy Little."
Oh my. So he
Yeah.
poured out beer on the ground in honor of his victim. And I'm just like, my jaw's on the floor with those stories,
And it's like report after, like, it's just witness after witness after witness. Like, he can't stop. And he even had some details that weren't available, were never released. These people said that he told them, like, about how much money he got, and then it wasn't very much.
I've heard 60 and I've heard 100. Do you know how much money he got from the
I've
register?
heard both of those two. One of the newspaper articles I saw from around that time said $93. So it was somewhere under $100. And so he told these people about that. A couple different people said he told them that, he had been partying and doing drugs that day with some people, and that they had, run out and no one had any money. And that's why they decided to do the robbery, just like with all the other ones that he did. But that this time the kid was a quote-unquote smartass. And so he just shot him. He's like, one of the quotes was like, "I fucked up and I shot him." But that he wasn't worried. He told some people he wasn't worried. After, a few years when he still hadn't been arrested or charged, he was like, I'm not really concerned about getting, in trouble or he said busted. I'm not concerned about getting busted for this one, really, because, they would have gotten me by now, and I got rid of the gun, and the sketches don't even look like me anyways. But he did tell another person testified that he told him to please go take down any of the sketches that they find and bring them to him.
Wow. Like, please retrieve those sketches. I'm not worried. They don't look anything like me. I'm a family man, but bring them to my door because I don't want them around.
I think he just didn't want any press, out there, like, talking about the case, getting people, involved in any way.
And I don't think he wanted anyone who he confessed to see the sketch or think about the crime, right?
Yeah, especially because he knew, that he's been talking about it. And, I mean, it wasn't even just people that he knew in Bloomington. Like, later when he had fled to Florida after getting out of prison for the other robbery, he was still telling people there. Like, he'd be like, "Oh, I'm from Illinois, but I can't go back there because I accidentally shot a kid during a robbery."
It's so outrageous because the way that True Crime Daily presents it, they have him, "I was clear across town." They present it really as an eyewitness case. You don't hear about any of these confessions. And kind of also a DNA case. We'll deal with that a little bit later. But what's the deal with the eyewitnesses in this case?
There was 2 eyewitnesses, as I said before, that, like, the kid across the street who did pick him out from the lineup, he's like, I'm pretty sure this was the guy, and, Jaimie Snow. But this other guy, Martinez, who they just keep referring to as the star witness, even though he was even impeached on the stand, he was not a star witness. I don't even know why they had him testify. If I was the DA, I would have never put him on the stand, because his story was that he was at the gas station, and he was there putting air in his tires when the police first showed up. Like, the silent alarm was tripped, so that's why the police were responding. And the officer who got there, Jeff Pilo, he was sitting across the street just watching to see, because, the alarm went off. He doesn't see anyone inside. And so he's just sitting there watching and waiting for backup when he sees this guy in the parking lot putting air in his tires. And he sees him, like, start walking towards the front door of the station and then turn around and go back to his car and drive away. But this guy's story was that, "Oh, yeah, I'm putting air in my tires, and I was going to go in and get a soda." But just for whatever reason, he started to walk towards the door, and he doesn't see anyone in there, so he turns around and goes back to his car. But while he's doing that, he sees someone walk out. He's like, "I see a guy," and he describes them, walk out, and apparently, this would have been, the robber. But the cop is across the street this whole time watching this. He sees him walk towards the door and back to his car, and he sees that nobody comes out of the station. Nobody walked out. I don't know why this guy lied and said he saw someone, but he didn't. There's no way that the cop wouldn't have seen this.
So that's one place, at least, that you might agree with the Exoneration Project, that Martinez is not a reliable witness to this crime.
Except for they want to say that, he did see somebody and that it just wasn't Jaimie Snow.
Oh, okay. So they twisted. And they also, there's something like a little bit of an interesting history with the first officer at the scene.
Yeah, they want to bring up the fact that the Jeff Pilo ended up becoming pretty infamous because he got convicted some years later for being a rapist. He was like a serial rapist, and he got sentenced to like 400 years in prison, like in 2000 something, many years after the crime.
400 years, wow, not getting out anytime soon.
Yeah, but like he's not like, okay, it's I guess an interesting anecdote, but he's not any kind of, I don't even know if he testified. I guess he probably testified at trial to like showing up, but it's not like he showed up and said, oh my gosh, I saw Jaimie Snow. He didn't see anyone. So him being involved, it really doesn't, matter.
But isn't he in the same prison as Jaimie Snow right now?
I don't know if he is right now, maybe. I'm not sure. I know that he was for a period of time.
Uh-huh.
And I guess they talked, and Jaimie Snow got him to file an affidavit, but his affidavit, like, I don't know how it even changes his original story. It's just, he just kept, reiterating that he saw nobody. He saw nobody leave the station. He watched the guy walk towards the door and then walk back to his car and all that, and that he's 100% sure that nobody else walked out. I mean, I guess it does something for them because it, impeaches his credibility, but, he changed his story. I don't know why the prosecution had him testify, because he didn't even pick Jaimie Snow out of the lineup. It wasn't until months and months later, after seeing his picture in the newspaper, that he changed his story and was like, oh, now that I see this picture, now I know it was Jaimie Snow.
The other things supporters say is that the people that testified against Jaimie Snow all got deals to testify, to sort of frame him for this crime. Is that true?
No, it's not true. And they keep saying, oh, they got deals, or, it was just a litany of jailhouse snitches, that said this, and that they all had reasons to lie. And that's just not true. I mean, some of the people who testified, like I think it was maybe 3 of them, of the 14 or 16, were in jail with him when he had confessed, but definitely not all of them. And none of them got deals. One of the claims they were making was that one guy who was facing like 2 to 10 years for forgery, like 10 would have been the max, he got 4 years. And to them, this is somehow proof that he got a deal, but there's no evidence at all. This has been something they've claimed for many years and filed appeals based on. And the court finds every single time that there's no evidence that anyone got a deal. And, probably a lot of them do have criminal records of sorts, but that's because Jaimie Snow was a lifelong criminal and, hung out probably around, kind of shady people. And those are the people that, he'd be confessing to. But not even all of them. There was a girlfriend who said that on the night of the crime, her boyfriend came home late with Jaimie Snow and said, Jaimie Snow was in a lot of trouble. He actually shot a kid at the gas station, like, can he stay with us? There was the people in Florida who weren't criminals who testified that, he had told them, I can't go back to Illinois, for this reason. And almost all of them were people who were lifelong friends of him, who they'd be like, in their testimony, they'd say, I've known Jaimie Snow for 20 years, and, this happened and that happened. And it's not just all jailhouse snitches. They've been able to prove nobody's gotten a deal. And it's not an eyewitness case. It's a Jaimie Snow cannot, stop talking case.
Yeah. And also the other thing they represented is that the prosecution is preventing the DNA from being tested.
Oh my gosh. The DNA. It's like such a convoluted, long story with the DNA, but it's just another smokescreen that it's ridiculous. There wasn't like really any physical evidence at the scene. Like, I think he was a pretty sophisticated criminal as far as not leaving. I'm sure he wore gloves. None of the crimes
he had some practice,
yeah.
Alexa. You know, he had some practice in robbing gas stations.
Literally lifelong. I know he even had, I don't know what it was, but he had a juvenile record. You know, just every couple years as an adult, he was arrested. Even after he got out of prison for the Freedom robbery and he was in Florida, he's getting arrested. But it's like never because there's, you know, they find fingerprints at the scene. It's literally always because he tells everybody, you know, that he commits these crimes. And so at the scene, there was a blood spot on the floor. And it wasn't too far away from the victim's body, and he was shot twice. So, you know, there's going to be blood spatter. And there was a spot on the floor that was a little farther away than the rest. And so they took a sample of it and, you know, saved it. But at that time, there wasn't really very sophisticated, you know, this was 1991. I don't even know how much they were really doing DNA at the time, but it wasn't tested originally. And after, you know, he'd been convicted, I think the first time that the defense or the exoneration project, whoever, filed to have this tested, they tried to claim that it wasn't DNA testing that they did, but they did some sort of testing on this spot of blood that proved it wasn't the victim. And since it wasn't the victim, they needed to have it tested against, you know, Jaimie Snow and put in CODIS and to see, you know, whose blood it could be.
So they're saying that the perpetrator, it wasn't just the victim's blood, but the criminal who shot Billy Little left his blood there. Yeah, they tried to say
there was a struggle. They're like there was bruises on his arms, and, you know, therefore it shows that there was some kind of struggle, and he had told people before that if he was in a holdup, you know, he wouldn't just willingly give away the money. So this spot of blood, since we know it's not from the victim, it has to be from the perpetrator, and we want it tested. And initially, the state, they asked the crime lab, like, can this blood be tested? And they were like, I don't think so. I think it's probably too degraded and can't be tested. Well, they made a big deal about it, and after, you know, so many years of, you know, the testing getting more sophisticated, finally they decided that they could try. And they did. And I saw the lab report from, what was it? I think it was 2009 from of the results. And the results concluded that indeed it was the victim's blood. It was Billy Little's blood. So I don't know why they were claiming that initial tests showed that it couldn't have been, but that's an outright lie. It was the victim's blood. And after it came back, you know, conclusive that it was, they tried to say, oh, well, wait, hold on. We don't know if it really is that spot of blood that they tested. Like, we want to know, we want all these documents to show, like, is it this, is it that? Like, just motion after motion. Then they said they wanted the victim's clothing tested for DNA. And the state actually agreed. The state was like, okay, fine, we'll test the clothing. Great. And I guess they didn't really want the clothing tested because after the state agreed, the Exoneration Project, or Tara Thompson herself, filed a motion saying, never mind, we don't want the clothing tested. We just want to know about this blood. We want to see if there's any other blood. But there's not any other blood. The only sample that was collected, it was like, when I was looking at the reports, it was like called sample 2A. Mm-hmm. The only blood that there was, it's been tested. It was the victim's. There's no other DNA. Like, they were saying they wanted DNA testing done on the fingerprints found on the door handle there, like the door handle of the gas station. And there was fingerprints found, and none of them belonged to Jaimie Snow or anyone. Like, they ran them through the system, didn't match anyone that's been a criminal or anything like that. But, you know, Jaimie Snow was probably wearing gloves, and he didn't touch the door, which is why they're, you know, making a big deal about it.
Wasn't Tara Thompson still insisting in court documents that the blood didn't belong to the victim even after that?
Yeah.
That's
she just
outrageous.
straight up lied. I was reading a motion she filed in 2013, after already seeing this report from 2009 that clearly stated it was the victim's blood. She was filing something in 2013 referring back to a 1991 thing that said, they didn't even say they did any testing on it, just said, human blood found.
Human blood found.
Yeah, she's like, it says, it's already been proven that this blood didn't belong to the victim, and then parentheses, it cites the document, which is what's called Exhibit 3, where it just says there was human blood found. It never says.
That's such a great lesson, though, in reading, in what they do and reading the documents. This isn't the blood of the victim, Billy Little. See my supporting document, 3, whatever. And
from 1991.
Right, from 1991. Then you get, she counts on you not to read that document, just to see that she's filed it and has supporting documents, even if you're going this far to actually read these.
It was 113 pages. It was literally the very last page, page 112, when you see what it was. And it's I am not surprised at all that publicly they would say it's been proven it's not the victim's blood, and all that. But I was actually shocked that in a court document, she filed it with the court. It was one of his appellate brief things, that she would just straight up lie in that.
It's amazing. I mean, it's really amazing, and shocking too. You wonder what kind of ethical bounds they're pushing there when they're presenting. They say that this evidence proves it. Obviously, they can make those kind of claims because they're, giving their case, but it doesn't support their argument at all. I don't know.
You would think that she could get in trouble for that. I mean, for lying and something you're filing with the court as an attorney.
I know.
She also says in it that he took and passed a polygraph, and I've seen that mentioned on Crime Watch Daily. They talk about it, and there's not I can't say I know for a fact that's not true. But I've never seen the document. I even asked on the Jaimie Snow blog people, does anyone they have every document you could imagine they want to show you as far as his side of stuff anyway, all the stuff they filed in court, and they have other people's polygraph results, all that on there. But then when it comes to Jaimie Snow, they just say Jaimie Snow took and passed a polygraph, and there's never a document showing it. So I don't even think that's true either.
This is really interesting because our journalists aren't helping out either. I mean, they're never asked a difficult question. Even when a murderer has just, gotten out of prison thanks to the Innocence Project, every article is positive that this person is innocent. Let's celebrate. They're a victim, Oh,
yes.
Even if they get out on a technicality,
accused,
they never
wrongfully convicted, been in the prison for 20 years for a crime they didn't commit.
Right. So are these lazy journalists or are they activist journalists?
I honestly think in most cases it's that they're dishonest and they're activist journalists. I mean, the one case that we saw that blog post for was that, what was his name?
Tyrone Hood. This is a really interesting case that the Exoneration Project just released. Tyrone Hood got him released from prison, and he's now suing the city of Chicago for his wrongful conviction money. And the city is looking to subpoena
Schmidl, that's his name, Schmidl.
Right, a journalist, Nicholas Schmidl, who wrote an incredibly inaccurate and positive piece for Tyrone Hill in the New Yorker, which also wrote a very inaccurate piece about the West Memphis Three. Now, why is it significant that it's the New Yorkers? Because the New Yorker is so proud of their reputation of being accurate that they would never have a comma. They have so many fact checkers. They would never have a comma or a period or anything out of place or missing or a misspelled word. And they make, great pains to correct any kind of inaccuracy.
Yeah, even as used to the journalism and the lies that I am when it comes to these cases, I was surprised when I saw it was in the New Yorker.
Yeah, me too. And so they're trying to subpoena this journalist to find out what his relationship was with the Exoneration Project and Tyrone Hood's lawyers, and was he possibly getting paid by them, or was he,
It said he was not on the
sympathetic
sideline.
as a sort of an activist journalist for him? What was his relationship? And it would be really interesting to see his deposition should that happen.
And the piece that he wrote was very influential because after the governor read it and heard that side of it, he just gave the guy clemency. Like, it didn't go through the court process. He was not, exonerated because irrefutable proof showed that he was innocent. Like, the stupid governor just read this completely dishonest story and let this guy, this murderer, out of prison.
Yeah, and that same governor, right, took part in the what do you call it? It was a gathering. What do you call it? A symposium.
Oh yeah, like a conference of sorts. It said
Right.
former
Thank
governor.
you.
He had a panel discussion,
Thank
literally titled "Trying a Case Outside of the Courts," and that was put on by the Exoneration Project at the University of Chicago, and which members actually discussed their strategy of circumventing the courts with media pressure.
you. Wow. So they know what they're doing.
Yeah, he was like, and that guy was working totally with that. Like, he was definitely an Exoneration Project advocate.
So,
One of the quotes from the symposium or whatever, the panel, was the most important thing was that we had contacts and that we used them at the right time in the media.
And the other thing is what's so great about these innocence narratives is that they want it both ways, right? So if you have an eyewitness that sees the Innocence Project's client do the crime, then eyewitness accounts are entirely unreliable, right?
Oh yeah, you hear about that constantly. The most unreliable evidence there is eyewitness testimony, blah, blah, blah. But then if it comes out that, they actually saw someone else, like when Martinez, in the Jaimie Snow case, picked out someone else, they were like, oh my gosh, this guy saw someone else, and eyewitness testimony is like so important because he saw someone else. But yeah, if it was Jaimie Snow that he said he saw, they would just say that it's worthless junk science.
Right, and it's so true, especially in lie detectors. There's another one, especially in the West Memphis 3, where 2 of the 3 took lie detectors and failed, in addition to, not having alibis. And you'll bring up that point without bringing up any of the other evidence, and they'll say, well, what kind of idiot are you? You don't know that lie detectors are so inaccurate
I heard him say before
and
it was
can't be used in court. And now here's a case where they're touting a lie detector, past lie detector test.
If it even happened.
Right, exactly. We don't know whether it happened.
But he passed a lie detector, But I seriously heard them say before that it was more reliable to flip a coin than to take a polygraph result at its face. But then if Jaimie Snow passes one, then all of a sudden it's the most reliable evidence there is.
Right. And then, of course, that, cops absolutely have to close a case, right? Every cop has to close a case. So
that's what I thought with the Adnan story. Like, that's what really got me. It was like, oh my gosh, this poor, victim, Heyman Lee, was murdered, and they just had to, people were outraged, and they just had to arrest someone. So they arrested the most convenient person, the ex-boyfriend. Like, they have to close cases. And Undisclosed and on Bob Ruff's podcast, they would talk about all the time, like, clearance rates. And they would say, like, oh, you're going to be demoted if your clearance rate isn't so high. And, like, clearance rate just means, like, someone's arrested. And so the cops will just, arrest anyone they think could possibly be guilty just to get that clearance rate, even if later the charges are dropped because there really is no evidence.
Isn't that just the ultimate projection, though, of something that they would do? Isn't it that they could be just so happy having a innocent person,
Yeah, as if all not only just the police, but the district attorneys, the judges, right. They're all just such horrible people that not only are they okay with having an innocent person, put away for life, and even in some cases the death penalty, you know, but then they're also happy to let the guilty person then just roam the streets to possibly do this again. Like, no big deal, whatever, clearance rates.
Right. That'll be good for us because our clearance rate when the real killer who's roaming the streets commits more murders, we'll have more people, innocent people to put away, right, for their crime as we
Yeah.
let him keep committing crimes. Right? Is that the
It's
idea?
so embarrassing that I used to think that was true. I just apparently wasn't thinking very critically, because when, you know, you play it all the way to the end, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to think that all these people who are, you know, public civil servants, not making, it's not like they're making millions of dollars from this stuff. They're not even getting paid much. That they would just all be that bad of people to run their lives like that.
That's another interesting thing I've heard you talk about is how many appeals for money you received from different innocence projects and how they always presented it like they were dirt poor, that they were the
Oh yeah,
underdog, that they were desperate for money.
they
And
would beg. Like,
the
I get
prosecution is the
emails all the time.
man with tons of money and tons of power.
They constantly will say stuff too, like, "Oh, we really need this testing done, but we can't afford. We don't have the money. Like, please donate. Like, this person, you know, this innocent person is, you know, sitting in jail, been in there for so many years, and we just don't have the resources to do all this testing. Like, please donate. Please donate." It's not
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, they're
The
just
state
being
is broke.
manipulative, so they're giving you, exactly what it's going for. We need, this much money to do whatever, the testing for this. When it's just, money to keep this innocence fraud machine going, in my
And
opinion.
like, a lot of these prosecutors have, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of cases on their plate, very limited time, you know, very limited budgets, and these innocence projects, when you just looked it up, they get millions. Like, I think it was like in 2016, $27 million donated to them. So it's not that the defense is always just this underdog, and the state has all this unlimited time, resources, and money. That's not true at all, especially in these high-profile cases like Adnan. And then Adnan's got millions of dollars, you know, not just in financial contributions, but free legal services, countless people, investigation teams, very high-level professionals trying to find any little thing they can to get him out. They're not the underdog at all.
So what advice would you have to someone who was like fully immersed in the innocence movement, or really a true believer in this kind of narrative?
To get out,
Get out.
now.
Uh-huh.
Reading, honestly, it's reading the court documents. You know, don't just believe what you hear on podcasts, or especially in the
this one,
media.
even, or this one.
Yeah, I saw just earlier when I was looking at stuff before, you know, preparing for the episode, I saw on the Crime Watch Daily website, they have a whole full article about it, about the episodes they did and about the case. And they're talking about how there's a bloody footprint found at the scene that were proven not to match Jaimie Snow. When you look at the court documents, I went right to there is actually posted online a transcript up from the crime scene analysis guy who was there, and his testimony at trial. There was not only was there not Jaimie Snow's bloody footprints, there was no bloody footprints. And they had they found some footprints by using like this Mylar technology, like dusting, kind of like you dust for fingerprints, that like brought up some impressions, but there was like, you know, multiple sizes of shoes, and they couldn't tell, you know, how old they were or anything like that. And they never went and like confiscated any of Jaimie Snow's shoes to like compare against any of them or anything like that. So it's just, when you read stuff like that, and then you read the court documents, it always just becomes so apparent what's going on. Like, don't ever take these people's word for it. Just read the
On either
documents
side,
yourself.
read it for yourselves. Look at both sides. Make up your mind on these cases.
And just know that they have, you know, an agenda. When you watch, you know, Making a Murderer or listen to serial stuff like that, these are the people that are trying to make money. You know, these are the people out for, not the prosecutors. They're not getting paid, you know, any more or less. Like, they're just trying to come up with a really compelling story. And, well, you know, what's more compelling than an innocent man, in prison for 20 years or whatever for a crime that they didn't commit. It's a story anyone could get behind if they believed it was true. And so they're willing to mislead you to get you to believe that.
It's really a story we love in America. Why do you think we love this story so much? Is it just like the individual up against the system type story?
Against the man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and wanting to do what's right. And, when you hear about, especially, innocent victims like Billy Little, just an 18-year-old kid, he had just graduated high school, he was a great person, or Heyman Lee, just these victims, you want to give them justice, and you feel like, if the wrong person's in there, there's this murderer roaming the streets while this innocent person rots,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to make it right.
Yeah, I think also it's very much, getting in the mindset of the convicted, of the murderer, and putting yourself in their shoes and saying, well, what if I were convicted of a crime and no one believed me, and the only one who, could support me was my lawyer and the Innocence Project, and it was me against the world type.
Yeah, they
scenario.
Really focus on that. Like, oh my gosh, undisclosed constantly. We talk about how, like, they just be like, well, it could be you. Like, it could be you. You could, walk in somewhere and walk out and, leave a footprint. And later that day, it could be robbed. And next thing you know, you're in prison. Like, it's so easy, to just get wrapped up in this. Like, any innocent person is vulnerable to have this happen.
Very much like the lottery ads. It could be you. You could be the winner, maybe with very similar odds, right?
Like Publishers Clearinghouse.
Right.
They could show up at your door.
Alexa, this has been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for talking to me about the Jaimie Snow case.
Thanks for having me on. I love talking to you about this stuff.